Welcome to today's episode of The Black Sales Professional. I'm your host, James M. Fields. Now, before we get started in today's episode, I want to share some information with you guys. This episode is part of a two-part series. So the first part that we're going to cover today are the 3 reasons for a lack of diversity in tech sales. And then on Wednesday, I'll be releasing the second part to this episode, in which case we address what can we do, how do we overcome the 3 reasons for the lack of diversity in tech sales and grow and add more people into the tech market space for sales. So let's take a quick break, and when I come back, we'll go ahead and jump into the content today and start talking about 3 reasons for the lack of diversity in technology sales. Now for the sponsors of our show today. We have the McDowell brothers, 2 young men, recent graduates of Homewood Flossmoor High School. What makes these 2 young men so special is the fact that they recorded their first album entitled Tribute to Inspiration while attending Homewood Flossmoor Community High School. You can find and listen to the rest of the album on their website, which is located at mcdowellbrothers.bandcamp.com/releases. McDowell Brothers, spelled McDowell Brothers.bandcamp.com/releases. Our other sponsor for today's show is JMF Financial Services Incorporated, a local insurance agency that specializes in both group and individual health insurance products, disability insurance or protecting your income, life insurance, and other ancillary services or insurance products such as cancer, critical illness, accident, and hospital indemnity plans. You can also obtain travel insurance as well as international medical insurance from them. They can be reached by calling 708-781-1603. That number again is area code 708-781-1603. And their website is www.jmf-financial.com. That website again is www.jmf-financial.com. Now back to our show. Welcome back. Okay, let's get started. Now, the first reason is fear. And what do I mean by fear? I'm not, immediately we may be thinking that fear being the stereotypes of white people being afraid of African Americans and people of color. And that's not necessary. That's not really what I'm talking about when I speak about of fear. When I'm speaking of fear, I'm talking about the fear associated with choosing to do something or being afraid of a negative outcome. And so let's talk a little bit more what I mean by that. And in order to give you a good example, let's discuss what sales are about, sales in general. And sales, remember from the first episode, sales is the fuel, it's the gas that makes the engine go, right? So sales funds everything. When you look at a technology organization, what are they trying to do? If it's a new high-tech company, the first thing that they want to do usually is generate enough sales to fund an IPO, get private equity, go public, things of that nature. So they're on a fast pace. That's what they want to do. They want to make money as fast as possible, or I should say grow their revenue as fast as possible so that they can get to the next level, which is either issuing an IPO or getting private equity funding. And in order to do that, they don't want a lot of roadblocks. They want people that can come in and sell right away. So sales in general fuels the whole organization. So if you don't think of it this way, if you're driving a car, you have your car and you don't have a lot of gasoline in your car, the car is not going to go as far and run as well as if it had a full tank of gas and always in great shape. So in a technology organization, the sales organization funds everything, outside of course, the private equity that may contribute to some of the research and development within the company. But for the most part, your revenue, the sales that come in, that's what pays your salary, your commissions. It pays for your entire sales organization. It pays for the support and help desk, and it pays for all of the engineering and things of that nature that the technology company needs in marketing. So sales is very important. It's the only other way that the company makes money: selling software, selling services. Okay. Now, when you look at sales from that perspective, there's an old saying: people buy from people they like and they trust. So, if people buy from people that they like and they trust, now maybe you may be getting ready to start to see how maybe there may be some challenges, right, with regards to diversity and inclusion. Because when you're trying to sell, when you're sitting in that executive room, their job and what they're trying to accomplish is to obtain either the IPO, the private equity funding. In other words, get rich. That's what they want to do. And they want to sell as much of the solution as they possibly can so that they can build the value of the company up and maybe sell it off, maybe go to the raise their stock prices, or whatever the case may be, whatever their ultimate goal of that organization. If it's a new high-tech company, if it's an older company that's been around, they have what their financial goals are that they want to achieve. And either way, at the end of the day, people buy from people that they like and that they trust. So now you may start seeing where I'm going when I talk about fear. And what I mean by going by fear is this. I started in the technology sales industry back in 1997. Simplex time recorder. I had a sales manager that was very progressive or liberal from Wisconsin. And so what he did was something pretty unique. He had two sales reps and two black sales reps and one white sales rep. Originally, it was me and a white guy. We started together. Then we hired a friend of mine. I referred him in. We then ended up going through a layoff. And what my manager had to do, he had to make a decision. He had to decide whether he was going to have two black guys as a sales team in Chicago, or if he was going to let my friend go. And because I was one of the top, I was producing, so he wasn't going to let me go, and then keep me and this other gentleman. And the reason I say it was an interesting decision is because back in that day, he was a pretty open guy and very candid. Me and him would talk. I would go out to certain accounts, and I'd come back, and he would tell me. He said, "You know what? That account called me, and they said they wanted me to send somebody else because they didn't want to do business with you." And so I said, "Okay." The first time it happened, I was like, "Okay, what are you going to do?" And he says, "Well, I told them that that's not the way we do business. We have territories, and that's your territory, and that's who they're going to have to do business with." He says, I'm not going to make a decision and send somebody else into your territory just because a customer doesn't want to is telling me that they want to do business with somebody else. And that was it was progressive or liberal at the time, because, hey, if he was all about his quota, there was a high probability that that customer that called in that said that they wanted someone else may not have done business with him, may have gone to do business with a competitor. And he probably could have said, all right, you know what, I have this other guy that I'll send out there, and if he was more concerned with winning the business. And unfortunately, there are a lot of managers and a lot of organizations that have that view. It's more important for them to get the money than for them to do the morally or ethically correct thing, which would be to tell the customer, no, that's not how we do business. But when you're in sales, you're the face of the company. So especially technology sales, you are the first person that they've seen outside of maybe the SDR, maybe on a Zoom call or something of that nature, but on a virtual conference call. But for the most part, you are the face of the company. You're who they're going to interact with on a consistent basis. It's going to be you leading that team, that acquisition team, which may consist of you and a sales engineer. And so the real question and concern, or the dilemma that people have, is, do we want the face of our company, how will having an African American or a person of color being the face of our company impact our sales? And will it? And does it give our competitor a competitive advantage? That's the quote-unquote business dilemma that I think that many executives and people find themselves in. And so it leads to unconscious and conscious bias. Unconscious bias in the fact that a person makes a decision to not hire an African American out of the fear that maybe their white counterpart, the white customers, may not buy from them. Conscious bias being that they do it on purpose. We do not want an African American or a person of color in this position. Now, when you start looking at technology companies, I'll compare it to other industries, and I'm going to say that it's a higher level of sale. Or I should say they're selling to higher end companies. When I compare and look at, say, for example, companies, payroll companies, for example, and security companies, they deal with small business. And the reason I've come to the conclusion that it has to do with that a lot of the lack of diversity has to do with the fact that that upper management may not be comfortable or feel that the customers would be willing to do business with someone of color, is because of this. When I looked at ADP and I look at, say an ADT or another company, security company, for example, one of the things looking at the payroll industry in general, so it's not just ADP, I'll say Paychex as well. When you look at their sales forces are aligned by territory, but both of those companies go to market via relationships. So the sales reps in the small business arena for ADP and for Paychex they get their business or drive their business from relationships. They go out and they meet with the local CPAs within the neighborhood. They do go into the banks for new businesses that are opening up and sitting in the banks, but still, for the most part, their business is driven by relationships with CPAs, giving them referrals. So when you look at the territories, you're going to find more African Americans in those companies, in the payroll companies, that work in the areas that there are predominant African American CPAs. Likewise, you're going to see Hispanics working in Hispanic communities with Hispanic CPAs, and Asian Americans doing the same thing. And then you'll have white reps that work across the board. But the main reason that they do that is, in my theory, is this. If I'm trying to build a relationship with an African American CPA, and I'm competing against ABC company over here, if my rep looks like that CPA and can relate to that CPA, there's a high probability that they'll do business with me. On the other side of the coin, if my CPA, if the rep looks different from the CPA, there's that possibility that they may not click. That customer or that CPA may not feel comfortable doing business with people of color, and so they may not send business to that particular rep. And so I think a lot of the diversity and inclusion issues has to do with the perception of senior management of whether or not their customers are going to do business with the person who's actually selling the system to them. And so you end up in these situations because, like I said, I had, moving up, I had numerous situations. In 97, 98, you have customers that are willing to call in and say, we don't want to do business with send us another rep. They don't want to do business with a black guy. And that was in Chicago. In 2003, I was the first African American sales rep in major accounts for ADP. Now, ADP has 3 divisions on the main payroll outsourcing side. Small business deals with companies 1 to 50 employees. Well, back in the day, it was 1 to 100. Then major accounts, 100 to 1,000, and national accounts, 1,000 and above. So your really large companies and organizations are national accounts. Your mid-market, so you're talking companies that make 50, 75, 100, couple $100 million are in that mid-market space. In 2003, until I walked in the door, Chicago had never had an African American. And what ended up happening? Once I started doing business and selling, it opened the door and other African Americans came in. Now, mind you, not a whole lot. It seemed to mirror, I'm not saying that it didn't, but I mean, it could have, it looked mighty close like they had a quota and that was what they were trying to stay within. But nevertheless, by having an African American who had been successful and people buying from that African American, they felt confident in hiring other African Americans. Now, they were very selective in what they did, but they were willing to hire an African American. Now, what brought me to ADP was the reassurance. As I mentioned, the sales executive told me, he said the reason that he hired me was because I had been beating them, that I had beaten his best sales manager and rep in a $100,000 opportunity. Well, the thing about that opportunity was where it was located. And then his counterpart had contacted him and told him, hey, if you have an opportunity to hire him because he's beating us. Once again, it was the location and the area in which I was selling. I was winning in Northwest Indiana. I was winning in an area, South Bend, Mishawaka, and Elkhart. Google it. You'll know that there's not a lot of, let's put it this way, for an African American to win business in that area was, now mind you, I did business with liberal companies because there were some companies out there that literally they did not do business with me. People would not shake my hand, all of that good stuff. But the first company, the biggest one, the $100,000 one, Searstar, was located in Hammond, Indiana, Northwest Indiana. So Or was it Whiting? One of the two. It was either Hammond or Whiting, right on the border. But nevertheless, it was in Northwest Indiana. And so that was the reassurance that the sales executive in Chicago needed, that me as an African American, I could do business with other individuals, that white people would buy from me. And that was the reassurance that they needed. Let's take a few minutes, and when I come back, I'm going to address the second reason for a lack of diversity, and that is something that we all hear and know, and that is lack of experience. I'm going to share some information about that. Welcome back. So, we just finished discussing the fear factor and what were the things that have to do with fear. Now we're going to look at lack of experience, because that's an objection, and it's an objection that we frequently hear for people of color, and those individuals who have no sales experience trying to get into a sales position, is the objection, of course, of a lack of experience. And so I know that probably many of you out there are asking the question, well, if I don't have any experience and someone's not willing to give me any experience, then how am I supposed to gain the experience that I need in order to get experience, right? Well, the thing about the issue at hand with the objection of lack of experience is this. When you see an entry-level position, all entry-level positions aren't the same. So just because you see entry-level doesn't necessarily equate to meaning first-time job. It may mean that the company that, well, I should say this. It does mean that the company's lowest level sales position has certain requirements. Now, when you're in sales, as I mentioned in the very first episode, there's different types of sales jobs. There's B2B and there's B2C. So business to business and business to consumer. Business to consumer is considered a simple sales process. And what I mean by a simple sales process, and even small business is considered a simple sales process, because the decision maker is typically one individual. If you're dealing with residential, you're dealing with the owner of that particular house or property, or a couple, maybe a married couple or something of that nature. So, but you're dealing with people that at the end of the day, they're the owners of the actual property, or the rental apartment or what have you. So if they make a bad decision, it is on them, right? Well, and there's no other person really that they have to deal with. When you get into technology sales, however, technology sales is considered most of the time a complex sale. Now, not all technology sales, for example, on the security side, it's not always what I'd say complex, meaning having multiple buyers or multiple decision makers, but sometimes it does, even in the small business arena. But most of the time you're dealing with an individual business owner, and the systems are not very complex, so therefore it's a simple type of sales process that you're going through. when you get to technology or software sales, now you are dealing with complexity. And the complexity that you're dealing with tends to be that there's more than one stakeholder in the decision. And you're selling business to business. When you're selling business to business and there's multiple stakeholders, and then you have to manage that particular sales process. And that particular sales process is considered complex. So, for example, let's use the example of selling, say, HR payroll. And you're selling to a company maybe with 75 employees. Now, that's considered a small employer at 75 employees. But it's not a simple sale. It's a complex sale. And the reason it's a complex sales process is because when you look at HR payroll for a 75-man company, you may have payroll that's under finance. So you'll may have a payroll manager who reports to a controller. So that's on the financial arm. And then you may have an HR person who is separate and reports maybe up to the director of operations or vice president of operations and to the owner of the company. So, and then because it's software, you may have IT involved as well. So you may have an IT consultant or a CIO, depending on the size of the actual revenue size of the organization. So when you have those three stakeholders, those three separate departments involved, and then you can end up having, that can bring 6 people to the table that have a decision or have an input in the decision that's being made. And as a salesperson, you have to navigate that. And that's what makes the sale complex. As you take other examples where you may be selling a software application that you're selling where the decision or the sponsor, the executive sponsor, is the vice president of sales. However, it impacts a number of people, and the system is running on the company's network. So therefore, it's going to impact IT. So you have IT involved. Once again, you have multiple stakeholders, and therefore the actual sales process is complex. Complex sales processes companies tend to need to have individuals who've sold before, because then they understand sometimes they understand how to manage those different sales processes within the sales process itself. So you have a simple sales process versus a complex sales process. And now you take and complicate things, because going back to the beginning, when you're dealing with technology companies, you gotta remember that technology companies are looking to grow fast. They're looking for either revenue, investments, IPO, quick build and sell off. They have there's a number of different strategies that to make money that the owners of a technology companies may be looking for, which will impact ultimately how they view their sales force and what they need from a sales perspective. Now, when you look at the various sales processes, let's just take an example and do a comparison of 2 different industries. Let's compare they're both technology type of industries, but let's compare a residential security system salesperson with that of a technology salesperson selling software. The residential person, as I mentioned to you, they're selling to one individual, or a household, and there's no real ramifications. That technology person selling to multiple people. Now, when you sell to a residential person, if there's a problem, let's say I sell a video system to a homeowner, and the system for some reason doesn't really meet what they want, but they made the decision and they bought it. Well, they have no one to blame. They have no one to hold that can hold them accountable except for themselves, because they made the decision. When you're talking about complex sales and business to business, that is a much different animal, especially when you're talking about technology or software sales, because you're selling an application that's designed to help a particular organization solve a problem or to enhance what they're doing in productivity. And if it doesn't do that, or if it causes problems, people can lose their job or be blackballed. So, for example, if I am the sponsor of a particular solution, I want to make sure that the solution that I choose and the money that I recommend that the organization spends is used in a good way, because it can be a career. I've literally seen it be a career and a job-ending decision when people make bad decisions. If they recommend systems that have bombed or failed in their implementations, you talk about people losing their jobs. They lose their jobs. And so, and it's not just in small companies. I mean, I've seen it in large organizations. There was a large school district in Illinois that implemented a software solution, and it was extremely problematic. And as a result, there were a lot of issues and decisions, and people making decisions to leave organizations as a result of that particular decision. Now, mind you, you're talking about millions of dollars being spent, but still, people lose their job, or they lose the opportunity for advancement in an organization because of a bad decision when it comes down to acquiring products or services. So people are very, very skittish when it comes down to that, and they want to make sure that the people that they're working with know exactly what they're talking about. So it makes things a lot more complex and risky. The other aspect is this. If I am a sales manager, a hiring manager, I have a team, and I have a budget that I have to hit, or a quota that I'm responsible for, and I'm compensated for. Now, depending on how that situation plays out, may determine whether or not I'm willing to take a risk on a person who has no experience versus someone who has experience. What do I mean by that? I have a team, let's say, of 5 people. Now, if my current team of 5 people, I'm sorry, 4 people, because I'm looking to hire an individual. If the 4 other people are combined exceeding my budget, so for the year I'm making my numbers, and historically my team has produced well, I may be more apt to take a risk because I know the 4 other individuals can pull the weight of the team. Now, on the other hand, if these 4 individuals are middle of the road players and they're hit or miss with regards to their quotas, then that can be problematic. And so I may not be willing to take a risk, or may not be able to take a risk. If I'm under plan, I definitely can't. I'm not going to be able to take a risk. If I'm under my budget, I have to go out and I need to hire someone as fast as possible who I know can get ramped up as quickly as possible and generate revenue, because the months are going by, and and the longer I have that position available, the less likely I am to make my goals or my financial budget for the year. So when I look at that, it comes down to risk, right? So if I have 3 candidates, candidate 1 has outside sales experience, but not software sales experience. Candidate 2 is an SDR. So they have inside prospecting experience. However, they do not have necessarily the actual sales experience. So managing the sales process. And then I have the third candidate, and the third candidate has no sales experience whatsoever and no prospecting capability. Now, when I look at the 2 candidates, the 2 that necessarily don't have sales experience, I'm going to do this comparison. If I have an SDR team internally that's producing opportunities, then truthfully, the 2 candidates are probably in the same position, because regardless, I don't necessarily need them to be able to prospect, because we have an SDR team that's generating opportunities. Okay? Now, that SDR that's applying does have an advantage, because that SDR, I do know, if push comes to shove, their pipeline is going to stay strong because they have the ability to generate and to prospect. This third candidate, who has no sales experience whatsoever and has no prospecting experience, I don't know whether they can do either job well. So they're the highest risk of all 3 of the candidates. So in order for that third candidate really to win or to get an opportunity, I'm either going to have the other 2 candidates really struggle, and I'm really not really comfortable with them. Or, like I said, on the other side, if, say for example, the candidate that has sales experience, they have sales experience, but it's kind of questionable. It's shaky. They're kind of a middle of the road player. Sometimes they make their quota. Other times they don't. They haven't really made. They don't have any real sales awards or anything of that nature. So they've never really been someone who has exceeded their numbers. Then that person, there's a risk, but the risk is not necessarily, if I'm chasing my number and that's all I have, then they are the least of the risky individuals for me to bet on in obtaining, because I know that I need to get someone in that territory that I can get ramped up as fast as possible to generate revenue. Now, if I'm at quota, now some people, I should say this, some sales managers will have that viewpoint. Other sales managers may have, or hiring managers may not view things that way. They may really look at the long game and say, well, let me really look and see this individual who has sales experience. They're not really a player. There may be a B or a C player, but this individual, these other 2 individuals, one of them is the SDR, and they're an A player as an SDR. Maybe I'll give them an opportunity if I have the ability, if I have the time, and I have and I'm not under the gun for making my numbers. That may be the situation in which I go under. But for the most part, most of the time, the biggest objection is lack of experience, and the reason for them saying they have lack of experience is for that very same reason that I'm just mentioning. It is really risky, and you don't know where they are in how long they've had that position available, and what their situation is as far as the rest of the team is concerned. If they're struggling to meet their numbers, they want someone that can come in and go and get up and running really quickly. Matter of fact, if you're talking in the interview and they start saying that, then that's probably the situation that they're in. They're in a situation where they need to make their numbers, and the rest of the team may not be pulling enough to hit their numbers. So they need to bring someone in to help them get to that number. So they're looking for someone with more experience who can do that. So lack of experience, and the reason being because technology sales, software sales, is a complex sales process that you have to go through versus a simple sales process where you're dealing with one particular individual. So now we've just covered the first segment, which was fear, and what is the fear, what's causing the fear behind making a decision to go with a person of color or something, a person of color, or someone who doesn't have any sales experience and is a person of color. Then we just discussed lack of experience, and now mind you, the being a person of color also enhances the risk, because once again, in the back of that hiring sales manager's mind, they may be asking themselves, based upon the territory that I have, the type of businesses that are in this territory, are they going to buy from this particular individual? Will this person have an issue with selling? So that's one of the things that why having some experience will makes the person feel a little bit better and remove some of that risk, because if you're black and you have a track record of selling, then they have the ability. Then that particular hiring manager probably is going to feel a little bit more comfortable with you, and feeling that their customer base may be receptive, and it may not be a hindrance of you not having when competing against the competitors in that territory. Let's discuss the third and final reason for a lack of diversity in technology sales, and that comes down to financial risk. Now, in the second segment, I discussed a lack of experience, and I used that as that's one of the objections. And during the course of my discussion, I mentioned risk. Well, in this portion, I'm going to discuss the financial risk associated with hiring someone with no experience or with a lack of experience. And I'm going to compare and contrast this. I'm going to use a comparison between the security services industry, physical securities industry, and the technical sales. So selling of residential and small business security systems, intrusion alarms, video surveillance systems, in comparison to selling business software solutions. Okay. The reason I'm using those two is because both of them are, say, entry-level positions, but I want to show you kind of the difference between, as you're looking in and you're maybe evaluating a career in sales, you need to kind of understand that there's a huge difference. Technology sales, as I mentioned to you, entry-level doesn't necessarily equal first-time sales. Whereas when you look at, say, the physical security industry, residential and small business sales are first-time sales positions for people, and the base salary for that industry tends to be a base salary of $0 to $24,000. So, and then there's industries in between there. For example, my first outside sales job was selling for Icon Office Solutions. So I sold black and white copiers. My base salary was $500 a month. That was my base salary. And then everything else was commission. Now, on the physical security side, why is it that way? And one of the reasons that you have a base salary of $0 all the way up to $24,000 is because in the cases where you have, say, a base salary maybe of $24,000 with some companies for small businesses, because their small business, they don't necessarily sell any residential, and their sales cycles still, even though a small business can end up having a larger longer sales cycles in some cases. Um, they want to, in some way, shape, or form, get a higher caliber of employee with and reduce turnover, so to speak, in attracting someone and giving them a base salary of $24,000. It's showing somewhat level of commitment. Whereas on the other side of the coin, when you have no base salary whatsoever, really it's eat what you kill, right? It's a pure hunting type of sales position. The risk to the company is very low because at the end of the day, if you don't sell anything, then they don't owe you anything. But also on the other side of the coin for that is those type of sales are very quick. So on the residential side, it's a one call close typically. You go, you meet with the family, or the owner, or the person who's renting. You explain to them the system, and you either sell the customer, or you typically don't. So it kind of just depends on what it is. So you get the business, it's a one call close. Small business, same thing. Maybe a little bit longer than a one call close. You may have to meet with them a couple times, but for the most part, when you're meeting with them, they're going to make pretty quick decisions as to whether or not they're going to move forward with you, and you're closing a lot of deals quickly. Whereas when you look and you move over into the technology sales, when you're dealing with software sales, the sales process is longer. So the sales cycle tends to be anywhere from 90 to 180 days. So the base salaries are different. On the software side, went and researched Glassdoor, and I looked to see what's the base salary minimum, what's the salary range for SaaS software providers, right? And what I found was that the salary ranged for base salary of $45,000 to, on the higher end, of $60,000 for an entry level position. $60,000 was on the high side because it was like only about 9% of the employers pay, or less than 9% pay $60,000 base salary. But $46,000 was the average, was the low, on the low side. Okay, so now let's look at that. Physical security, 0 to 24. Software sales, 46 to 60. Okay, now when we look at the software sales, the comp plan, now employers are known as kind of what their mix is, right? Typically, you may see companies with, say, what's called a 30-70 breakdown. So 30% of your total of your on-target earnings is going to be, say, base salary, and that's it. And in that model, 70% is at risk. So 30-70. Some are 40-60, some are 50-50, some are 60-40, and 70-30. And so just really, when it comes down to to a sales position, you have to kind of talk and find out what type of employer are they. Are they a 70-30, meaning 70% of your base salary, of your total compensation, is base salary, and then commissions only are supposed to, at plan, comprise 30% of your total compensation, or the other way, or vice versa. So for most software companies, they're 30-70, 60-40. For the sake of this example, we're going to use a company. We're going to say this company has a starting as a on target earning, an OTE of $80,000, and they're a 70-30 employer. So 30% is base salary. 70% is going to be at-risk commission bonus. So 30% of $80,000 is roughly a $24,000 base salary. Okay? The balance of that, or $56,000, is commission. That's at risk. Okay? So now, one of the other things that differentiates the um, the technology sales jobs from other sales is that they have what's called a recoverable and a non-recoverable draw. So they give a draw because what they want to do is they're kind of a high income type of organization, and so they want to cash flow their sales representatives at a certain level. And it's actually a very, very interesting or very smart psychological thing that they do. And it's not just done by the software companies, because actually the payroll companies do the same thing. What they do is they take what they want you to earn, what you're supposed to earn, and they in the first 3 to 6 months they give that to you in what's called a draw. And there's two types of draws. There's a recoverable draw, and then there's a non-recoverable draw. A recoverable draw means that the company is going to recover what they pay you based upon the commissions that you sell. A non-recoverable draw is a draw in which you're not going to have to pay that back at all. So you're not going to have to pay the recoverable draw, but you will have to pay the recoverable draw. Now, when you come and start within the job, they give you typically a package, or what they'll do is they'll say, okay, your base salary in this instance is $24,000, and then they're going to give you maybe, let's say they anticipate the ramp up period to be 3 months. So they're going to give you 3 months of, let's say, non-recoverable draw. So for the first 3 months, this is your training period. You're going to get that recoverable draw. Then after those 3 months, you're going to go to what's called a recoverable draw. So basically, they're anticipating you having sales now, and you're supposed to recover or sell and commission enough to cover and recoup the draw. So if they give you, in this situation, the recoverable draw would be $4,667. So they're anticipating each month you having enough commissions to make that be zero. So you wouldn't owe anything to the company. So if you sold and had your commissions of $4,667, then everything would be just you would just be 100% commit. You get the commission on that. Now, if let's say you only sold $2,000, the balance they would still pay you. They would pay you $4,667, but then you would just subtract the $2,000 from it, and you'd owe $2,667 in the next month that you have to recoup. Now, what makes this so risky is, let's say a person comes in with no experience whatsoever, and as the hiring manager, the person struggles. And so for the first 6 months, they sell very little to nothing. Okay. That means the company, when you look at this financial model, if I'm cash flowing a person at $80,000, it means I'm on the hook for roughly around, because for the first 6 months, I've got to pay the recoverable draw and the non-recoverable draw. So that's all gone for 6 months. And then I'm paying the base salary. Now the base salary is small. It's only $12,000. But the commission side that I'm paying you is on the higher end. So now that company is on the hook, and you sold very little. So as you can see, you have the financial risk, a high financial risk. So obviously they're going to want someone who can come in and sell within the first 3 months. Matter of fact, the goal is they want you to sell as fast as possible. So if you can get in and start closing business in the first month or two, then that's great. The faster they get to generating quota, right? So the financial risk of hiring someone is high. And so that is one of the other factors that tends to really truly lead to a lack of diversity in technology sales, because those hiring managers get a little bit edgy, and they're not willing to take that risk on those on people of color, because once again, hey, I don't know if these people are going to buy from you, and you may not, and if you don't have any experience on top of it, now my risk is really high, and now I have a financial, I've quantitatively put a number to what hiring someone without a lot of experience or no experience can cost me. Okay, so in conclusion, as I said, there's three reasons that lead to why I believe that there's a lack of diversity in technology sales, and those three reasons are: number one, fear; number two, a lack of experience; and number three, high financial risk. Now, in the following episode, I'm going to discuss, because it doesn't seem like that there's a way around this, right? But the reality is there is a roadmap to overcoming all of these objections. There's a roadmap to overcoming the fear. There's a roadmap to overcoming the lack of experience and a way of positioning yourself, and minimizing the financial risk. And in the next episode, episode 5, I'm going to discuss with you and share with you that particular roadmap. So make sure that that if you haven't already signed up or subscribed, make sure that you subscribe to either iTunes to get this podcast, Speaker, or Spotify. Go ahead and do that, so that make sure that you have access to the next episode that'll be coming out on Wednesday of this week. Also, if you haven't by now, make sure that you go ahead and join the LinkedIn group, Black Sales Professional, as well as visit us on our YouTube channel, Black Sales Professional, in which case we take the audio podcast, and we're adding video content to it, so that you can see the information, not just hear it as you're driving in a car or sitting at your table. If you want, you can pull up the YouTube channel, and you can actually see the presentation and the information that's being spoken about in the actual podcast. Now, if you also make sure you reach out and DM us. Share this with other individuals. And make sure that you comment and let us know how we're doing. And as always, until next time, take care.